KCBS News Time, 11:32. May 1st is National College Decision Day, a good time to explore how the pandemic has affected whether high schoolers want to go to a four-year university next year. For more, we're joined on the KCBS Ring Central Newsline by Matt Jacobson, founder and CEO of Ducere Global Business School, and as a thought leader on innovation within education. Thanks very much for talking to us today. You write that the pandemic is highlighting the total misalignment between students and college objectives. Can you talk about that?
Yes. Well, thanks so much for having me, Rebecca. In terms of the misalignment between colleges and students, I think what the pandemic has done is really highlighted lots of the challenges that have already existed, but it's just really brought them to the fore. So, for example, colleges and students are actually not focused on the same things. You might think that colleges are there as a purpose to educate students, but actually they're not. Colleges and universities are focused on research. They're focused on how many academic papers they can publish. That's the core of what drives university rankings, and rankings are then used to lure students. But actually they have nothing to do with student outcomes. So really there's a misalignment between what universities say they're doing and what's really happening in practice. So universities' mission statements will often talk about things like being inclusive, being for society as a whole, advancing community interests. But actually they work to try to limit as much as they can the number of students, which sounds kind of like a little bit of a weird thing for universities to do. Why would you want to limit students? But there's this strange headspace that universities have got themselves into that somehow the lower the percentage of admissions, the more prestigious the institution. So this is really serving students poorly, not serving students well at all, because universities are actually making admissions more difficult when they should be living up to their mission statements of doing everything they can to make the dream of college more open to students and not being elitist.
Yeah, that really certainly seems to be the case for undergrads. And so is this something students are figuring out, especially since they're, paying for university but doing it from home right now?
Yeah, that's another really, really great problem to highlight. And, universities have been criticised for having a cost crisis in academia for a very long time. The pandemic is not a new issue relating to costs of universities. It's been around for years. But again, the pandemic is just highlighting the problems around admissions. So in universities in the US, and I might not sound like I'm from the US, but I'm based in Orange County in California with the Ducere Global Business School. But in the US, colleges are 1,000% more expensive than British world-class publicly accredited universities and other international equivalents as well. So let me repeat that, 1,000% more expensive. So why is that the case? It just doesn't make sense. It would be like, imagine Ferrari trying to sell an average American family a $500,000 car, but saying things like, oh, don't worry, we're going to help you out in these tough times. We're not going to raise our tuition even higher. That's essentially what colleges are doing here. They're keeping a freeze on their tuition, but the tuition is already 1,000% more expensive than international equivalents. And when you're sitting at home doing Zoom calls, it really, really highlights what am I paying for in a $150,000 degree or a $250,000 degree.
On the other hand, there's the whole idea that we want to cultivate creative thinkers, critical thinkers.
Yes, that's a really, really good point. So in terms of cultivating critical thinkers or creative thinkers, there's a really, really big debate and an interesting research area around general education and the concept of general education in the US. People take for granted in the US college system that general education is just a standard requirement. It's kind of what everyone does. But that's another misalignment between students' needs and students' goals and what the universities think they should be doing. So, for example, if you actually ask students why they're going to college, they'll say things like, I'm going to college because I want to get a job. I want to be a graphic designer. I want to be a computer programmer. I want to get into business. And so they want to focus on career outcomes. But universities actually believe they know students better than students know themselves and say things like, you need to learn French literature and medieval history and calculus and years of education that students don't actually want or need. And there's a lot of problems with that. It means that the US education system is not only 10 times more expensive, it's actually much longer. So here's a little bit of an irony. You mentioned at the beginning about, do students still want to go to a 4-year college degree? So you'd probably be, reasonable to think that a 4-year college degree takes 4 years, right? Well, actually it doesn't. A 4-year college degree takes on average 5 to 6 years to complete. And one of the reasons is all these broad general ed requirements. It's just way, way too long. In international universities, which now the pandemic has opened up people's thinking to doing fully online degrees, but at a great institution that's international and doing it online, you can do a full bachelor's degree in 3 years, sometimes even 2 years. So imagine the amount that you're saving in tuition and the extra earning power by graduating years earlier.
Yeah, but I suppose that comes at some cost to the university. Very good points. I'm afraid we have to leave it there because we're out of time. But thanks very much for your time, Matt Jacobson, founder and CEO of the Ducere Global Business School. KCBS News Time, 10:30.